I'm Dawn Wisher.
And I'm Katie Metz. And this is How to Teach College. Welcome back to How to Teach College. I am Katie Metz, and I am here with my beautiful friend and colleague. It's been a little bit.
It has.
I missed you.
I missed you too.
So, we're doing something fun. This is Dawn, by the way. You didn't even...
Well, I said I'm back, and my creepy voice that I assumed people would know by now.
We're doing something different today.
We are.
Where are we, Dawn?
Well, I feel like it's almost like I feel like there are people watching me.
Oh, man.
It's so odd. Isn't there a song like...
Somebody's
watching me. That's the first time I've sang on the podcast. So there's that.
Create a singing podcast.
Okay, we won't do that. So yes, welcome listeners and welcome audience members. We are live from the FALCON conference. Let's see, this is fall 2019.
It is,
and I should have I meant to say what the theme was, but I don't have the program in front of me.
We'll edit later.
We will.
Later.
We won't.
But
this podcast episode, we are talking about how we learn. So, of course, we get to be in the classroom and helping our students learn and learning with them. But this podcast episode is how we learn. And so we are here with colleagues from other universities that do what we do. They are in the classroom and they are teaching. And so actually before we even turn the mic on, we solicited some questions that we hope we can take and be able to answer those so that we are engaging the people that are in the room with us as well as the listeners.
So pressure's on because for the first time ever, somebody other than our dogs is watching us record this podcast.
Yes.
So what are we learning about today, Dawn?
Yeah, well, spoiler alert, one of the ways that we definitely learn is by going to conferences. And so we'll be talking a little bit about, I know I went to a session last night, so I can speak to that a little bit. But I wanted to frame this. A friend of mine, her aunt was actually the CEO of Burberry at one point. I think she's at Apple now. And she had told me that her mantra was to always be learning. And this was a few years ago, and I liked that. And I tell my students, that's my mantra. And I love learning with and from them. And I've got the book with me. Of course, the listeners can't see it, but Linda Nielsen's book, Creating Self-Regulated Learners, is one that I'm looking at right now. So again, spoiler alert there, another way to be learning. But I like this quote from the book, and it talks about lifelong learners, which I know we've talked about on the podcast before, but basically, she says, only lifelong learners will be able to keep up with the explosive growth of knowledge and skills in their career and to retool into a new career after their previous one runs its course, because that's kind of where we are in the world, is that people aren't necessarily always in that one career from start to finish. But I think it's a good way to frame this with the fact that, yes, our students are learners and we are learners, and just that lifelong learning and just the joy of learning. And so we're going to talk about, conferences and books and journals that we look at, hosting podcasts. So anything you want to add to that?
We are at a conference right now. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? And something that I figured out about myself, early on in the process when I started attending conferences, I, as listeners know, used to be part of your department, Communication Professional and Computer Skills, and attended the Association for Business Communication conference a lot. Something that I noticed that was important for me is just attending the conference. So I'm going to get in trouble here with my live audience because everybody's attending a session right now and hoping that it's good.
Yes.
Which it is so far. But,
it's not like they passed out surveys beforehand or anything like that. So it's not like there's any pressure at all.
Critique us or ask questions at all. But, something that helps me a lot is just attending a conference. So I know that sounds so simple, but you're at a conference and other people are in like-minded situations. So even if my point was this, took me a minute, even if you're not attending a session, just being at the conference, I think is a really important factor in understanding your discipline, because you're networking with people, but also you're just in a mentality that we are here to learn. We're actually here because the goal of this conference is to get better at something, whether that is a pedagogical focused conference like FALCON or a disciplinary focused conference. So I found my best moments in conference learning in particular have come in two ways. One, from just being able to regroup. I actually went to a conference with my husband last week. It had nothing. It was a sport marketing association. It had nothing to do with me at all. But I sat in the lobby and worked for 2 straight days because people around me were frantically coming up with ideas, and they were focused on their own research and pedagogy. And it was just like really inspiring to kind of sit in a group of other people. But the second way is that you can go into a session. You're in an hour-long session or whatever it may be, and you can be there for 30 seconds and get one of the best ideas you've ever had. So some of my best learning moments have come from just a quick idea that somebody has given me that I can take on later on.
Well, last night, and I will talk to our live audience here, were any of you here for the Teaching Truths talk? And so the speaker, Mike, he definitely had us talking to the people at our tables as well as he was giving us information. And he did say that teaching is entertaining because we know that attention spans continue to decrease, and we do have to be engaging. So we can say engaging, we can say entertaining, but that's part of it. And so he even said, as you're on these breaks and getting coffee, go and ask people, how do you break up that classroom? Do you show a video clip? Do you have some class discussion? Do you have a pop quiz? What is it that you do? He even had us do some improv. And if you've listened to this podcast, then you know that that's a love of mine, is to utilize improv in the classroom. And he had us do that last night. So that's a good way just to even ask other people that teach. And it's interesting to get outside of the discipline. I know I saw someone in the audience here, Erin Cooper, who I watched a presentation that she gave where she talked about the lineup, where you can get people in a line and then start to ask questions and sort of have them move on that spectrum. So yeah, when you go to conferences, it may be someone that's completely outside of your discipline, but just seeing, hey, I do this in a physics class. Okay, I could apply that in a presentations class.
Right. Yeah. And so we were just talking about this with the live audience. Just spoiler alert, this is going to be a repeat for some of you. Yeah. But this podcast itself is a way that we have grown our learning in pedagogy a lot, partly because Michael Maroney, director of Facet, an audience member right now.
He is in the audience.
He is in the audience, and
so intimidating, that Michael Maroney.
Luckily, he's in the back, so I think we're good for now. And he has a question. I don't know if I'm going to post live just because it's intimidating too. But
there's a theme with that, Michael.
He talked a lot about incorporating, and not just with the podcast, but incorporating research into what we're doing. And so we've had to do a lot of work to plan these podcasts. For those of you in the audience, I'm going to hold up what we're using right now, which is not a script. It's just a fly sheet with some conversational notes on it. Most of this is completely on the fly. But we were reading a lot about pedagogy with no way to really talk about it or think about it. Mm-hmm. So having guests on, involving ourselves in the research more effectively, and then the most exciting thing, taking what we are doing here and bringing it to audiences like this, or even having conversations with colleagues about the podcast topics, has really been a great way for me to be thinking about learning.
Well, in the way that you said that, I guess I'd never thought of it this way before, but we all know that one of the best ways to learn is to teach. So sometimes we will have our students teach a topic or tutor someone, and that's a great way to learn. So, I mean, you're exactly right, Katie. I am applying for membership to Facet, actually. So that's one of the reasons I definitely have got to dive even more into some research this summer, putting my dossier together, and then just, as we mentor other faculty that are looking at their dossier. So we jump into this research. And so you are synthesizing it there if you're writing it, but then I'm an out loud processor, so I tend to talk out loud and sort of.
You're an out loud processor.
Surprise, right? And so, when we come together and we get to chat about these things and sort of say it out loud and hear yourself saying it, that is likely, that is how we learn, because we're, in a sense, teaching it to one another and to those who join us here on the podcast. And so as we're sort of teaching it, that is how we're learning it and really understanding it even more for ourselves.
Yeah, and to talk about a few general strategies about how we learn, there are a lot of really good resources out there, journals, books, workshops. The Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning at our campus is a fantastic resource. But I think the first step with me with really understanding how I learn is to go figure out what I needed to know. So episode 11, two episodes ago, I talked with a principal instructional consultant at Siddle, Lisa Curzon. We were talking about the expert blind spot. So we think we know about teaching a little bit. We know about our subject because that makes us credible in the classroom. But just finding a place where we can actually feel comfortable saying, what's out there? What do I need to read? What do I need to learn about? And what's good? What information out there is actually credible and not somebody like who had a good idea but kind of spit it into a book that ended up being a little weird. Yeah. So just like that filtering process, go figure out what you're missing, whether that's an assignment going badly for you in a lot of ways, or whether that's just a gap that you feel like you have in your knowledge about pedagogy. Lots of resources. I'm going to make a pull for the journal that we have at IU, JSOTL, and we've actually referenced it on this podcast a couple of times. It's a pedagogical focused journal with a variety of disciplines, and that's been really helpful for research in our
I know we
podcast.
Definitely, when we talked about attendance, we wanted to see what the research said,
critical
and then
thinking.
be able to say, okay, this is how it's applied in our classes, and then forming teams. So definitely that's a great one to look at.
Yeah, and I think the final thing before we get to questions that's most important is that, and this kind of like spans off of what the first question I'm about to give you to read, this is like a roulette here, is that it's great to think about pedagogy from a lot of different disciplines. So don't just, I'm in accounting, I'm not just going to go to a pedagogical source that specifically relates to accounting. In fact, from the place I spin off most effectively is into a hard science. Like I like to see what biology professors are doing or math professors are doing. They're a little bit more quantitative. So don't limit yourself to your specific discipline, because you can get lots of awesome ideas and be able to translate them and frame them better and into your own environment.
I feel like we've come back to just even that notion of being humble and, like you said, just being able to recognize what you don't know and being okay with that. It's probably not just academics where people feel like they have to sort of put on this front that they do know it all and they don't need help. I'm sure it's that way in other fields.
And I'm going to give a shout out to the back of the room here. You being an expert in your subject doesn't make you an expert in pedagogy.
Right.
And so that's why we are here. Yeah. And I think the first question I've handed you illustrates that a lot. I know who wrote this question, by the way.
Okay, so here is question number 1.
We're going to take questions from the audience that are pre-written and pre-filtered. We're going to take 4 here just to kind of give you a sense of what we're thinking about right now in this audience.
Okay, so here's question number 1. Do you use trial and error in your classes? And if so, how do you use trial and error? And what effect do you expect when you use trial and error?
Literally my entire teaching career has been
trial and error.
Literally the entire thing has been trial and error. I trial and I error and then I fix it and then that goes better and then it gets worse. Man, that one spoke to my heart right there. That's been literally my entire career. But how do you specifically?
Oh, goodness. Now I got to think for a minute. Can you think of a specific example there?
So this semester I recovered kind of from the terrible semester I had last fall. So if you'll recall, last fall I had a class that just didn't go well for a variety of reasons that you can hear about in episodes 1 through 5, where I was just crying over the mic for
It was a little bit of therapy. This is also a therapy podcast. It was very
intense. It was just very intense. But I fixed that class. I actually went to a summer course development institute, which is one of the ways I learn, and fixed it. And it's going better. My students think it's going better. And I'm also listening to the things they're still fussing about in my class. So one thing I did, and it's better, but it's never going to be perfect. And that's one of the things I like about my job. So one of the trial and error kind of fundamental things I did, this just happened yesterday, actually. where I have a student who hasn't been doing great in the class. He's had health issues. He had a really bad experience. He's retaking this class because of a really bad experience he had with the class under a different instructor. And so I was like, fine, okay, I'll let you make up a few points here. This is an assignment that I just wrote from scratch that I'm planning on giving my students in spring 2020. Do it and tell me what you think about it. And he gave me really good feedback. It was a little hurtful. No, I'm kidding. He was like,
if there aren't tears, are we really learning?
If I'm not crying and they're not crying, are we all really learning? But he was basically telling me that he liked the concept of it better than just the monotony of the previous one. And he gave me some feedback for how I could even make it better. So that was definitely trial and error, getting myself into a key place.
Yeah, I like that.
Where like I had to go, here, I don't know if this is any good, but to a current student who's going to evaluate me in a couple weeks.
I tell students all the time that I wish I could pay them to like look at my Canvas course, because when I look at it, it all looks great. And then they start to find the inconsistencies. Or one, let's see if I can say this, the short version, because there is a podcast called, oh goodness, I'm forgetting the name of it. But it basically brings to life inanimate objects. So like they had...
this is getting weird.
It's going to just get weirder and weirder.
Okay, fun.
They had a can of cola basically like tell their story. So it's quite funny if you just need to check out. It's a podcast.
Oh, this is interesting.
And now I'm totally blanking on the name of it.
What's your story?
And so I basically had my students, they work on a project for Macy's. And so they basically took on like these different private brands, like the hotel collection. And I was like, you team are the hotel collection, and kind of had them act like they were telling the story from the right. You're all like, what? Yeah, that's about how well I explained it as well. Because it was this foggy idea I had where I just listened to the podcast and I was like, this is really funny. And again, I do use some improv. So it wasn't impromptu. I was like, just pull this together. You're going to learn some great things about this company that you didn't know before. You're going to have fun. You're going to just, be weird. Just go with it. And it was one of those things where they actually really liked it. They did give me some feedback on some ways to make it better. But it was one of those where you have to have that transparency to just say, hey, I'm trying this. It might fail. But we're not going to get better. I want you all to take risks. Let me take a risk in front of you. And so it is funny because with my class I teach, this semester I have an overload. So I basically am teaching the same class like 5 times. So it is kind of funny because by the 5th class, it's dramatically different because trial and error has been like the first 4.
Let's talk about trial and error. I lectured the hell out of that in my very last class, of course. The first class, I had no idea what I was talking about. And the last class of the same.
It's like, I got it. Finally.
I'm like, you guys got the most amazing lecture because I had to do it wrong twice yesterday. But you guys
got the good one. You guys
got the really good one. So trial and error, I think, is, in summary, if I don't have trial and error in my class, I get really bored. And so having trial and error, or just going out and saying, okay, let's just try this and see if it works. If it doesn't,
and I think that they can appreciate that because the classroom is a lab environment. Yes. What a great place to try and error and fail and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and own the mistakes, as we heard last night.
Yeah, tell them you're doing that and solicit feedback.
And then they can go, okay, you want us to try something. We can trust you that you're doing the same thing. All right, on to question number 2. How do we bring or how do we get curiosity to be a part of learning?
How much time do you guys have? I think we need an entire podcast for this. But so I think the first step in curiosity being part of learning is making it relevant to students. Mm-hmm. So I'm teaching an accounting class that's explicitly not part of the curriculum for accounting majors. It's for finance majors or other people who potentially need to take the class, but definitely not accounting majors. They don't care at all about accounting coming into it, but I have to get them curious about it in the way that it will impact especially their careers in the future. So if I'm making it sound like if they don't do this, their boss won't love them, I guilt them a little bit. I'll guilt them a lot. Or if I'm saying like this is sort of a fundamental thing, or you'll be better this way, or even that this particular component, I'm framing this subject or this micro part of the subject to specifically tailor it toward what you are going to see in the future. So an accounting example is my finance majors do not do journal entries. They do not do T accounts. They don't create financial statements. They look at it from the end user's perspective and ask questions about the financial statements from an investor perspective.
Like
so they ask a lot of what if questions, a lot of projection questions. That same level of class or same concept of class would not fly with accounting majors because they actually have to learn how to create the financial statements because that's what they're going to be doing. And I figured out that when I framed it in a way that said, you're actually going to need this going forward, they got curious about the subject. I got way better questions.
I like that, switching the perspective and them being almost the audience and seeing it from that side. Yeah. That would make it more interesting.
And that's the feedback I continue to get from them, actually, is that they want to see even more of that. Now, I'm an accounting professor. I have limited knowledge of what they are actually going to see, but it's inspiring me to do more research about their topic. What about you? How do you get your students curious?
I think, gosh, should we use guilt too often? I find myself saying, you are curious. So I think just reminding them, because we have these, I know that they know what's going on in the world. I mean, they're smart. They are curious. So sometimes I think saying that, like, come on, guys, like, you're curious. Why don't we? But so my class is a presentations class, and I think I try to get them excited about sometimes kind of playing the devil's advocate or the contrarian. So listen to these other presentations, and I tell them the burden of asking the questions for Q&A really is on them. But again, I'm like, you're curious. Wouldn't you want to ask questions? Wouldn't you want to listen and be able to ask good questions of the people who are presenting? So I think that's one way to do it. It's just reminding them, again, that we are all learning. We get to learn. But I like your takeaway of just continuing, though, to make it not only applicable for them, but sort of, even applicable. Like, you'll see, this will be important to you.
Yes.
These skills, critical thinking, learn to do it now because you're going to need this your entire life. Like, it's not just an exam or a presentation. There's so much more habit building and skills that you're getting out of these classes.
And my finance classes need it framed, how to make your boss love you. That's literally, I know, it's bad, but that's literally how they need it from. They go, okay, I'll do whatever you say to make my boss love me. Yeah. Accounting students don't feel that way, but finance students, senior finance students who know who their boss is going to be, need me to tell them.
Like, tell me more.
And what
other secrets do you have?
That's such a bad way. This is how I learn, but it's also like kind of a dirty secret that I have. Final question here, Dawn. Right. Also recognize that handwriting.
Going with number 1 on here.
Yeah.
So this is our third question. Describe a recent aha moment you had about teaching.
Oh, man. So one way I learn is by figuring out where my students are. And this is like not the aha moment I think that the writer was asking for, but I'll say it. I was embroiled in this like insane academic misconduct case last week. This is not at all where you thought this was going, but here we are. And my aha moment that I had about teaching is that in order for me to keep my students on their toes, I have to do different things. And the reason I'm bringing up this academic misconduct case is that I had a student who didn't even pretend that he wasn't doing this. He was paying for answers on the platform that's probably very famous to you called Chegg. And he came to my office and told me he was paying for answers and that I probably should look more closely at his assignments. And he's really sorry. Just an error. The reason that he was able to do that to begin with is that my effort to try to reorganize my class, I was still using book problems to give them homework. And book problems are accessible on the internet, and students get lazy and they know that that's accessible. So I actually had a pretty intense, and again, not maybe the direction this was going, aha moment where I said, okay, I could do the same kind of assignment here, but I really have to be better at, now that I have my feet under me with this class, I have to be a lot better about creating original content so my students actually do it. It was a hard one to have, but really important. So actually that assignment that I just referred to where my student redid or tried to experiment with the spring 2020 assignment was my own work. Okay. And that was part of the experimentation of, I think I have confidence to write my own stuff from scratch. Yeah. But I didn't realize I had to until I literally spent the better part of a week writing academic misconduct reports about for a student who's probably going to get kicked off campus because he paid for answers.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Yeah, sorry.
But we told people before. I can balance it out. But we were saying to our live audience that oftentimes the learning does come from those moments. Not always the aha positive light bulb moments, but sometimes the aha kind of punch in the stomach. what comes to mind for me, and again, I can tie it into what the speaker talked about last night with teaching truths. And I'm thinking, one, he noted there will be challenges. And I think that's where he talked about, technology often fails, or you've reserved a specific room for a specific activity and then something went awry and you don't now have that room and you're kind of all in the hallway awkwardly looking at each other. But for me, and so I guess this is an incredibly specific moment in time, I'm a control freak. I mean, I like for things to go. I'm a planner.
I can attest to
Type
this.
A.
How
yes.
nervous were
Not
you?
as much as you. I mean, just you're more organized than I am is what I'm getting at.
That was hurtful.
No, you sometime look at Katie's files. They're very organized. All of that to say, I definitely, I plan the classes. I know what we're doing. And I don't like if I have to cancel a day or something does go wrong. But I've found, so let's say that I have a toddler. Let's say that she's sick or I'm ill and can't come in, or there's tons of snow, whatever it is, right?
Reasons why your toddler wouldn't be able to go to school.
Cancel classes usually. But I have found when I do have to cancel class and I'm like, I can't cancel this day. I can't. This of all days is the one that can't be canceled, is normally when things go better, or because it forces me to get rid of the plan. So again, one of the reasons I love improv is because I'm still learning it. It's very, be able to go with the flow, live in the present. You don't have to have the script, which again, I've done this for years, but I'm still, some people say it's almost like a religion. And I'm like, yes, it is, because you're kind of always learning it. But like, I can't think of one example. A few years ago, I went to China for a week with some of our students. I think it was over spring break. And we ended up having to stay for, I believe, another full week. And my students had a big case competition basically right when I was returning. So I should have been back for a couple of class days to continue to work with them, play that devil's advocate that I like to play and ask them really good questions about their idea and help them poke holes in it, just get them presentation ready. And I had, I was in China for 2 extra days and then came back and they just wowed me. They were able to, it gave me the opportunity to maybe create some online assignments that they could work through. A colleague asked me years ago, do you trust them? And I still hear that voice often because I get to the place where, if we're being humble and honest, I probably don't, because I trust myself, right? And so sometimes it's easy to say like it's me driving the ship, but it's like when I have to take a step back and put it back in their hands, it's really good for me and good for all of us, because it's like, whoa, you guys, you got this. And so I think that's like the aha moment that I continue to learn, is to just have that flexibility, let things go wrong, because chances are something good will come out of it. And then just that, do you trust them? I have to come back to that often. I wish it would just solidify in there. But
I trust them.
Yes.
The second half of that question was advice that we have for somebody who's just starting out in this profession. I think we talk about this on pretty much every podcast, but I think you just summed it up really well with that. Two things. One, you really have to trust your students, because even if they aren't trustworthy necessarily, they'll figure it out. And eventually they will be, because you're still running through the class. But the second thing is that you just have to keep being willing to change it up a little bit. You think you have a plan, but it has to change. We know this of having toddlers. I think that might be the most humbling change-up experience ever.
I'm changing a lot with this almost 2-year-old.
You change a lot.
I'm like, I can't control everything. Who knew?
I can attest that will get even better for you. I'm having a 4-year-old myself. Oh boy. But anyway, that you have a plan, and even if you feel like it went well, there's still room for you to understand how your students think you could make it better. So our live audience has been sitting here for 30 minutes while we do this. And I think, Dawn, that we just experienced a live podcast for the first time, and perhaps so did they. So I'm going to say, this is how we teach college.